Welcome to Decode Your Burnout, the podcast where we crack the code on burnout based on three primary factors: your programming, environment, and personality. We also feature experts who debunk the myths about what it takes to be successful in their industry and spin those tips to fit the workplace so you can optimize the way you work. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon Grossman, a psychologist turned coach, author, and burnout expert. If you're burned out and want to go from exhausted to extraordinary, book a free breakthrough session with me by going to bookachatwithsharon.com. And if you want to see how you're doing and what to focus on next, download the Burnout Checklist. You'll find the link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/checkyourburnout. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to Decode Your Burnout, the podcast with me, Dr. Sharon Grossman. And today I am joined by Lia Garvin. Lia is the author of Unstuck, Reframe Your Thinking to Free Yourself from the Patterns in People That Hold You Back. Leaning into nearly 10 years of experience working in some of the largest and most influential companies in tech, including Microsoft, Apple, and Google, to explore the power of reframing to overcome common challenges found in the modern workplace. She is a TEDx and SXSW speaker and has been featured as a guest on WGN Chicago and WJLA Washington, D.C. News. She was also recognized by the National Diversity Council as a 2021 DEI champion. I don't know that all of our listeners know what all of that means, but you certainly sound very accomplished, Lia, and I am excited to have you here on the show so we can talk all about how to get unstuck.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Absolutely. So what we'd like to do is just get started first and foremost with your own burnout story. So walk us through what happened for you. I know you said you're kind of just wrapping that whole thing up as we speak. So it's very timely for sure.
Yeah. So over the last few years, I had a vision. I was working in the corporate world, as it says in the bio. And over the last few years, I wanted to start building a consulting business about how to help teams reframe common challenges, and ended up being the theme of my book, how to help establish more inclusive and effective team dynamics, how to do more coaching and things like that. And, I started doing that while doing my full-time job. And so I wrote a book. I would wake up 5 a.m. and write before my daughter woke up, and then go back on the computer after she went to bed, and doing that 7 days a week. Also, in that process, wrote and delivered a TEDx talk, and started to build this consulting business where I would do stuff either, offline or outside of work hours while doing a full-time job. And for the first 2 years of it, I just was like running on full speed, and any sort of free moment in my day I would use towards putting make it productivity centered, do it. And when I launched my book this April, people would say, when did you do this? How do you make time for this? And I was like, yeah, I just, you get up early. And it started to hit me over the last few months, just because I could do all of these things and become kind of constantly exhausted did not mean that it was sustainable. And I think what hit me was a few weeks after launching my book, my goal was to actually move out of working in corporate after that. And then I didn't. And I stayed going to my day job. And then another week and another week and another week went by, and I felt really unsettled internally. And I realized I had been fully depleted. I was fully burned out. And I started to I was caring less about this dream that I was building outside, because I was just so it was too much stuff to focus on. And it hit me in June that I was going to have to make a choice, that it wasn't sustainable to do all of the things at once. I was totally burned out and was feeling like this is kind of the moment in which I had to make that call. And so I actually left my corporate job. Friday was my last day. This is my third day on my own. So
congrats.
yeah. And I think making that choice, it just sort of clicked into place. Like, okay, yes, this is what I would be focused on, that there's a lot to figure out, but there was a lot of ground I had already laid. And the kind of cognitive load capacity is able to free up just by making that decision, not having to straddle those two worlds, like already in the first few days, it just feels different. Like there's going to be stuff to worry about and stress about. The business development side is, a new area, but I think what I know I have stepped out of is this really burned out, just like doing it all kind of stay above the waterline piece.
So in a word, ironically, you got yourself unstuck.
I went and got myself unstuck. That's right. Yeah. Which makes you a great candidate to help other people as well. Yeah.
But from everything you shared so far, it certainly sounds like you are a doer.
Yeah.
Do you know that about yourself? Does that resonate?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about here is environmental stressors as contributors to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's kind of interesting is sometimes people burn out because they take on too much. But then it can also be because you've got all these environmental stressors. And in your case, it's kind of like a mishmash of the two, right? Because what do I mean by that? In addition to working essentially 2 jobs and writing a book, that's all the doing.
Yeah.
You're also raising your daughter and writing a TED or delivering a TEDx talk, right? And you're doing that 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So certainly a lot of doing happening, but also things outside of just your career. There's other aspects of your life. And so all of it demands time and attention.
Yeah.
You start to feel like it's taking some of your energy away to the point where you've worked so hard to build up this side and you almost kind of lost it, right? You stopped caring about it.
Yeah. And what's, to add to that, I think this is probably another dimension is the work that I do is around helping people feel better about their work, more included, more effective. And so there was an emotional sort of piece of that, like a frustration of, working with people that felt so stuck and so frustrated that I also felt that way. Like, there was all these layers that I think in removing myself a little bit to take a step back, I could actually serve people in a more whole way because, I'm sort of, refilling thy cup, for myself where I can be kind of, okay, well, let's look at this now in a bigger way, not kind of also in it. I think it gave me a lot of, to be also in it and having that experience, I really can see where that's showing up for folks. I think there's a lot of value there, but you don't got to be in it forever to, there's still value to be gained now, taking a little bit of a step back. Yeah.
So in a sense, it's almost like you created this niche of getting unstuck, perhaps to help yourself get unstuck. I mean, it's served you as much as it's served other people, which is
for sure. And I mean, the whole book is really based on my own experiences with these 12 dimensions that I talk about, from navigating feedback to negotiating to decision-making to talking about our work. And really it's looking at, why did I feel stuck? What was happening here? And as I was coaching and mentoring and connect with other women, I saw, wow, I'm not alone in this stuff at all. We're all feeling in really similar ways. And so, but yeah, a lot of the stories and examples and tools are things that I tried and either worked or didn't work on me, and I had to try new approaches. And so that's really what I share in the book.
And I get to imagine that feeling that stuckness can contribute in and of itself to burnout, because you feel that sense of fulfillment. You feel like there's a sense of despair and like it's not getting accomplished in the way that I want, or it's not resolving itself. And it's like a Groundhog's Day type of experience. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. And I think that's what I see with a lot of the folks that I've worked with and talked to is this feeling of I've tried everything and it's not working, or I don't know what to do other than this. And so there's this, I think you start to burn out because you keep trying. So there's like an exhaustion with that. And I think with things like, you know, looking to do a career pivot, or you keep applying and do jobs, and like it's just not landing, you kind of start to feel like all these inner critic not good enough, or maybe it's me, and all these different sort of thoughts start to come up, which also consume a lot of that cognitive energy. And so it's just draining to continually feel like whatever you try isn't working. And I think one of the areas that I noticed shows up a lot in the workplace that I connect to burnout in the book specifically is gaps in accountability, and how oftentimes when work isn't getting done on a team or in an organization, folks that step up to try to help and get things done, they end up getting overly taxed because people think, oh, okay, someone else is solving it over here. And so, from reframing our understanding of accountability from either, picking up the slack or blame or punishment, something that people sort of avoid or actively avoid, I should say, to ownership, we actually can reduce burnout because everybody's really clear on what their role is in keeping an organization functioning. And I found, I think the times when I felt most burned out and depleted in my regular work before working on all these, side things, was when I felt like I was going above and beyond, but other people weren't. And noticing all these gaps, and okay, maybe if I just do more, right? I think that's often a common theme too, that can burn us out, because you reach a point where more isn't better. It really isn't. And it more just actually creates this diminishing return cycle for yourself.
I'm so glad that you said that, because a lot of my clients are clearly high achievers, but also very, very smart. So they have a lot to contribute, and they're happy to do so because they lead with their heart. But when they don't feel appreciated, or they see some sort of injustice, that brings on so much resentment, and that contributes 100% to burnout. So I think it's an important dimension to talk about. Now, I know that with regards to getting unstuck, you have some myths that you want to debunk for us.
Yeah. So first myth, the concept that I talk about, the central theme of the book is reframing, or looking at a challenge through a new perspective. And the first myth there is people thinking, well, do you just mean looking on the bright side? And so I think myth one, absolutely not. Reframing is not looking at the bright side, because there is not a bright side when we're talking about, especially in the lens of the book, I talk about the experience of women in the workplace primarily, and double standards, biases, these limiting beliefs that we often take on because of these situations, these factors, these forces. It's not like a look on the bright side when you're talking about bias and discrimination. Absolutely not. It's saying, hey, this is the context. While I'm pushing against changing it, we're doing that on a greater scale. How can I operate within it so that I can still achieve my goals and I can still be successful, and not fall into these patterns and beliefs around that feedback is a criticism and it means I'm not good enough, right? Like, so I think that's the first myth. First myth is thinking, when we're talking about reframing, it means chin up, look on the bright side, just say a positive affirmation. No, it's about saying, what is another way to look at this problem? And then what else is available to me there? So I mentioned feedback, feedback, I think, is one of the hardest things we deal with in the workplace, because we have such a, conception around it that it means it's a criticism or something you've done wrong, or something someone doesn't like about you. And when that's our perspective, any feedback someone shares is going to be like, oh God, like, what is it? When someone says, can I give you some feedback? It's like punch in the gut. If we said, okay, what's another way to look at this? Not bright side. Another perspective is, feedback is information about how another person is perceiving me. It's not right. It's not wrong. It may not be good or bad. It's just a data point. And so that reframe can start to build a little bit more comfort. It can take this thing off of feeling like it's about us and our worth, and put it kind of out there in the middle.
Yes. One of the biggest things that my clients struggle with when it comes to these kinds of things, and when we talk about reframes, is personalization.
Yes, exactly.
Where something happens and then they make it mean something about them. And that brings up so much negative emotion. And one of the things that I share with them is 99% of the time, it's not about you.
Exactly.
So what if we were to reframe the situation where you're not part of the equation? What would that look like?
Yeah.
And that completely changes the outcome.
Absolutely. And literally, now that's my myth too. 100%. As you said, I say to people, we think it's about us. It means I'm not good enough. It means, I'll never be able to cut it. I'll never have this.
Yes.
So my myth number 2 is it's not you, it's your approach, right? Or that's my myth bust of the you. And so I say that to folks exactly as you've said, when you change your approach, you change your outcome. And so, that when we take ourselves out from the center of it, as you just said, we see, oh, okay, for example, applying for jobs, when I was sending out my book proposal, when I was applying into TED conferences, rejection. Then you say, okay, I believe in this idea. I've gotten feedback that I'm onto something. There's been a signal that I'm on the right track. How else can I change my approach? And a lot of times that means enlisting help. And so in situations for me, I've gotten a coach, or I've asked for more feedback, or I've changed the way I'm positioning myself for my content. And just like that, you see the outcome shift. And it's just another reminder, when you shift your approach, like a whole nother set of outcomes become available to you. And I think especially as people are exploring career pivots and transitions and all these things, to say, if something's not working a bunch of times, that's the signal that the way in which you're doing it is the thing to re-examine. It doesn't mean you should give up or you're not the right person.
That's a really positive message. I think if somebody is listening to this right now and they feel really stuck, it's an opportunity to really look at, what are you doing that doesn't work? And what other potential possibilities exist that you haven't explored yet?
Yeah, exactly. And so that brings me to this third thing I wanted to share. Another myth bust reframe is, a lot of times we ask ourselves, when we're feeling stuck, when we're feeling frustrated, we get into this zone of wanting to analyze it and get to the bottom of it. And we start asking ourselves why questions. Why did this happen? Why did they say that to me? Why did they do this? And the ego and the inner critic is demanding an explanation, and it's never going to be good. It's always going to be defense, right? And so I would say the myth is believing if we keep analyzing it, we will get an answer that isn't something we've already thought of. And very rarely do we come out of this why defensive space in somewhere productive. A lot of times it gets into feeling worse, feeling more hopeless, feeling more burned out, exhausted from all that thinking about, this thing over and over, the rumination. And so the antidote to this myth of wanting an explanation is reframing our questions from why to what. And instead of why did this happen, saying, okay, what else might be possible? What else might be true? What else might be going on with that other person, right? Bringing empathy into the picture, because then we're looking expansively at moving forward, what else is possible, as opposed to, let me go backwards and kind of still feel terrible about that thing that's in the past. And I think there's, if someone's wondering, well, what if I want to learn from that thing that didn't work out, or what could have gone differently, is it definitely still sort of suggests some learning there. I think it's about why me space is the part that can get really problematic and make us feel really again, we're at the center and there's something wrong with us. But what could I have done differently? What could we have done differently as a group? What else is out there are things that you can look at the behavior and the work, as opposed to you and your identity, self-worth, and things like that.
And this is actually so important. I just want to highlight this, because so many people do get stuck in the why me, and they feel really victimized by their situations, and they feel like there's nothing that they can do. It's so disempowering. It really is a recipe for getting stuck. And I love that you gave this tip of reframing it so that instead of asking the why question, you're asking a what question that allows you to move forward instead of just thinking about the past and like all the things that have already happened.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's like, it's not blaming like victim or victimizing. It's saying, hey, this is a frustrating situation. This thing isn't good. It's not okay. It's not what I want for myself. And saying, okay, so what else do I want? Right. And so it is about moving forward. It's not about discounting that experience. It's not about not being able to sit with that pain or frustration about a rejection or a setback. It's saying, okay, yeah, this thing wasn't how I want it to go. This isn't where I want it to be. This is making me feel stuck. So now what? So it really is, it's about moving into action.
So now I'm thinking about your story and your tips and how they all kind of come together. And, you mentioned how you were in this process of juggling 100 things.
Yeah.
And that's what brought you to burnout and really feel kind of stuck with low energy and loss of motivation. And then you realize that you can reframe your situation. You can change your approach. And that by taking steps towards maximizing your results, right, what you really want, it sometimes means, like in your situation, that you take a risk and you leave the security of your full-time job and everything that is familiar and certain, and you take that leap. But it's like when you're straddling both of those worlds, that's really where a lot of burnout happens, because it's just too much for any one person.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that there's this piece here where you can actually reflect back on your own story and share that along with these tips, because I think a lot of people do feel stuck. They have this sense of despair because maybe they have tried so many different things and nothing's worked.
Yeah.
They really don't know where to go next. I love your idea about working with a coach, because I think that is sometimes helpful, especially when you've tried everything you know what to do and you're still not getting results. Part of what a coach does is they're supposed to look to find your blind spots.
Yeah.
Sometimes it expedites your entire process by having somebody show you exactly what's getting you stuck. It could be a mindset piece. It could be an approach piece, like all the things that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? It could be history.
Yeah.
Right? Like the victimization piece can go way back into your childhood, and there could be some repetitive patterns that you're stuck in. So being able to work with somebody who can help you see exactly what's happening and give you a blueprint to move out of it is certainly, I think, part of the puzzle. So thank you so much for coming and sharing this story and all of these fantastic tips. Is there anything else you want to kind of leave listeners with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you mentioned the risk that I took. And I think for many of us at many, points in our life or whatever situation we're in, we can't take that risk to leave something. And I would say really acknowledging, well, what kind of risk is right for you that will help you move forward? So maybe it's taking a risk of taking a class, right? And learning a new skill. And then that starts to open a door. Or maybe it's, asking, okay, I want to become a manager. Is there some mentoring I could do? So asking to take a risk in a project or new space at work. Maybe it's launching a side hustle while you're still, in a full-time job, which is what I did. Maybe it's, doing a little bit of writing, or, I think there's a lot of times when, we need to really, there's a lot of considerations that make it hard when it's about the job change situation. But I would say a lot of things, there's a lot of risks that we can take that maybe we haven't realized are those things that will propel us forward. And I think a lot of it is getting in touch with, well, what am I really excited about, interested in, passionate about? What's something that I could do to fuel that? And then that starts to paint a picture of, what a new direction that you might take would be. So I just want to say there's a lot of ways to I think, take risks towards getting unstuck. Sometimes it's about a job change. Sometimes it's just about, learning a new skill or taking on a new kind of work. So,
and to add to that, and to bring us back to an earlier point that you brought up, asking for feedback is taking a risk, but it's something that can also help you get unstuck.
That's a huge, I love that. I love that. Cause that's like the first place. I mean, if you're not able to really, if you don't have that comfort talking about feedback, it's going to be tough working with a coach or or being self-reflective with all the stuff that we've talked about. So I think I start my book actually with feedback, because I do think it's the first place to start, is forming a better relationship with being self-reflective, recognizing the difference between, your own sort of, thinking through things versus inner critic telling you can't do anything. Those are very different. And so, yeah, taking feedback is a risk, and getting better at it is a risk, and it's all worth it.
So if somebody's listening to this and they maybe want to work with you, where should they go?
Yeah. So I think first place to start is to check out my website, www.liagarvin.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram at lia.garvin. And on YouTube, I have a channel where I talk about a lot of these concepts from my book. Channel is Reframe with Lia. But yeah, if you're interested in working together, either as individually one-on-one coaching or for your team, workshops and consultation for a team, start with my website. And that's a great place to get in touch.
Fantastic. And we'll also link to your book. So anybody who is interested in reading it, I think it's a worthwhile read. That would be great. So we talked about how you had all these balls that you were juggling, and clearly you are a doer. And so for all of you doers out there, I'm curious, what are you going to take away, or what maybe are you going to do differently based on Lia's tips and strategies? And, you may not be just a doer. Maybe you're a thinker. So for all of you thinkers out there, what did you think of the show, right? What are some reframes that maybe you can use to help change the way that you think about your circumstances? And if you're a feeler, how did hearing this story make you feel? Now, regardless of what your personality code is, my goal is to spread the word that burnout is a unique experience. And by decoding it, you can find solutions that are equally unique to you. Please help me spread this message by subscribing to the show on Apple or Spotify and leaving us a review telling us what you think, feel, or do differently because of the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can also leave me a comment or questions to answer in future episodes. And please recommend the show to anyone struggling with burnout. If you are ready to take the next step with me to decode your burnout, go to decodeyourburnout.com. I'll see you right back here next week. Take care.